So, I was a Democrat my entire life up until I was taught how to do research. I went to school for journalism at San Francisco State University and I interned at a radio station. So, I learned how news is broadcast and I was taught by a research department. As a matter of fact, I was taught by the person who ran the research department at the news station at Cron 4 at the time. She was the actual research. She was the head of the research department at Cron 4, and she was a professor at San Francisco State. So I was trained by bona fide professionals. I was also trained by one of the original programmers of Sesame Street in children's programming. So my background is completely unique. Um, Now, as I got older, there was things that I saw that didn't align with what I thought was right for my people. Let me show you.
My parents were addicts until they weren't. Went to about 11 elementary schools. Grew up homeless. Lived in two shelters in San Francisco, two in Oakland. And education really was the refuge. It was like, that was the thing that was going to get me, out of poverty. And it's something that when you go to that many schools, you start to notice differences and you notice things. And where you got to make things happen. And even when the system isn't doing what it needs to do, you gotta push on that system while at the same time having plans A, B, and C. And so that's a little bit about me.
What is the issues that the system has, the education system has, that you see
Well, I think
based
they have
on
a
your
ton.
experience and what you've studied?
Yeah, I think they have a ton.
This is a big deal what he's talking about.
Predict with a certain level of accuracy how well in life somebody is going to do education-wise by how much money they make. I think that is a sign of a rigged system. I think that if you don't know how to navigate this education system and take everything that you need from it, you're not going to get the things that you necessarily deserve. And so the system is inadequate in that the level of quality that young people that may be born in poverty, immigrants, whatever the case is, they're not getting, what they deserve. They're not getting the very best. And I think that's a big problem. And so, listen, man, any system where you can look at third grade reading levels and then predict how many prisons need to be built, I would say that system has some flaws.
So you grew up in the Bay Area, in Oakland, and you went to 11 schools. What did you see? What do you think is the challenges these schools are facing?
I think they're facing a bunch of different ones. I think that around what the priorities are. So, for instance, a lot of people like to talk about Kentucky in a bad way. I used to live in this place called Paducah, Kentucky, but they were so adamant about reading, like making us do reading competitions and reading out loud, things like that. So when I got to my school in Oakland, I had this really thick Kentucky accent. It was very thick, hard to understand. But it almost resulted in me being put in special education. And so I got lucky because on Thursday,
You see how quick they are to try to put somebody in some special ed or diagnose you with some ADHD?
I went from being earmarked to go to a special education class to then being a part of the GATE program, the Gifted and Talented program. And that's flippant, man. Like that is so irresponsible. But that was just the luck of the draw. So something that these schools are missing is a level of stability where you can also have the amount of rigor and scrutiny that is, required if you're educating the masses. I think that when you go to a poor school and a poor community, I don't think there is a high level of academic accountability and rigor. And that's part of the thing we're going to talk about today, which is inflated grades. I graduated with a 3.83 something high. I graduated really, really well. I had A's and B's and AP English classes, but then I was in remedial English when I went to.
This is emotional grading. Giving a person a passing grade or even maybe a good grade, because how you feel about their effort versus the actual, computation and their actual ability to do math.
Them and get what you need. So when you get that report card and that report card says an A and you're a parent, say, thank you, that I'm glad the kid got an A. Is my child proficient? Are they reading on grade level? And if they're not, what's the plan to get them on grade level? What do I need to be doing outside of this classroom?
So long story short, the grade that you get is not a reflection of your proficiency. You can get an A plus in AP English and still not be proficient in English on a fundamental college level. Advanced English class, which is supposed to be on college level, is not up to par. So something along the K through 12 is not aligning or juxtaposing for college level. That's an easy fix. This is a result of, there was years of people saying that, tests are standard, but people aren't. Okay, now they don't meet the standard and have to spend 2 more years. 2 more years means 2 more years of debt. Means that most of your financial aid or your student loan debt is going towards remedial education, meaning that you are in debt for something that your taxes already paid for. You are in debt 2 years. Remedial, that's like a constitutional violation, because you are paying out of pocket for what your tax dollars should have been preparing you for. That is a civil rights violation. It is a civil rights violation to not prepare children for school while receiving tax funds to get kids ready for school. That's abuse of federal funds. That's mismanagement of funds. There is no way that a child could be in an AP English course in high school and be behind in college. That means that the AP English course did not satisfy. It's basically like the state is patting themselves on the back and giving goofy grades while failing the kids.
Very different. There are absolutely more men in my family that have been to jail than have been to college. That's just a fact of my life and of my family. I visited my own mom and dad in jail, and God bless, they're doing great now. They got clean when I was in middle school. But not to belabor the point, I think if their education would have been different, I think if their economic opportunities as a result of that education would have been different, I don't think I would have had to visit both my parents in jail and live in and out of shelters and systems and things like that.
Reading data determine how many prison beds they're going to need to build. So currently, about 2 in 10 of our Black and Brown students are reading at grade level across the city of Oakland, and it's about 1 in 10 in math. So it makes me so nervous, because I think, what are all the careers out there? How are you successful in college or career if you can't bring your proficiency up to grade level? When I go to a board meeting, it is so rare that you actually hear, how are students doing? Pro-immigrant, they're embracing, they want everyone to succeed, but our actions as leaders need to line up to that. And when we are leaving 80% of our Black and Brown students behind and out of reading at grade level, those actions don't match up with the words.
Is it the different schools?
There's a lot of correlation. If you put our proficiency, one thing that we did to really motivate the parents was show them, if you map out the schools in the city, just geographically on a map, you can see more of almost all the schools that are green schools where there's a lot of proficiency. They're in the higher income.
Some of the grades that kids are getting, they cannot be trusted. Is that common in the school system now?
This is a national issue right now that's really being flagged in the national media. Parents across our country overestimate how well their kids are doing in school. This tells us something is broken within our education system in the way that we're communicating with parents. We can have kids be straight A students, complete their A through G requirements. They get to college and all of their classes are remedial, because when they take the college placement tests, they are not at a college level. So this is happening constantly. And it's actually one of the reasons that first generation kids, low income kids of color who get to college don't stay in college, because it's so detrimental, embarrassing, shameful. I felt that when I got to college and I couldn't do the work. It's such an assault kind of on your self-esteem when you get there and you can't even write an essay that is a passing essay in your English class, right, at a college level. So we have this huge disconnect between these grades that are getting sent home and the actual proficiency level. To actually share the data for Black and Brown students that just about under 50% were eligible to apply to a college. And kids, their minds were blown. They said, we had no idea. How come nobody told us this? I got to go talk to my cousin who goes to this other school where they have really low A through G rates. I got to tell him and make sure he's getting into the right classes so that he won't be left out of being able to apply to college. Absolutely. I remember a student with really severe disabilities who came into our school in kindergarten. His doctor said, look, he's just really not going to be able to learn very much. We're just going to integrate him so he can have a good experience in school. We partnered as a team. We worked so closely with that family as we worked with the medical staff that he had. That kid soared. He was reading on grade level by first grade. He astounded everybody. And, that was a case where we know we can make a difference. A report shows if schools in Oakland continue improving at the rate that they're improving at, it's going to take 4 generations for kids to be at grade level. A report shows if schools in Oakland continue improving at the rate that they're improving at, it's going to take 4 generations for kids to be at grade level.
And now, in terms of the funding,
sure,
I've always been puzzled because the funding amount we are spending in California is almost $23,000,
mm-hmm.
a little bit more than $23,000 per kid per year,
mm-hmm.
which used to be $10,000
right.
like 10 years ago or 12 years ago per kid per year.
Yeah.
So we have invested a lot more in the public education. What's going on with the funding?
Yeah.
Where does it go?
Part of what California is doing right now is really embracing a community schools model where it's not just the academic needs that are attended to in the school, right? There's social emotional supports, there's mental health supports, there's even health clinics in our schools. There's a great new model of linked learning where kids are getting career internships when they're in high school, they're doing work-based learning.
While we're having the issue with proficiency,
Correct.
while we're not doing the basics.
Correct. But in schools where we have very few students and we choose to keep those schools open, they're not able to provide a robust program. It's kind of like the bare bones, the skeleton. And we end up supplementing, right, from the general fund to keep those schools open. This is at a huge cost to our kids. Every year that we have schools where the vast majority, 80-90% of the kids are not reading at grade level, 50% of the kids aren't reading at grade level, there's such a cost that's borne by every student in that school and every family in that school. What we're saying is we probably need a different structure for our schools, to not have all these tiny schools that are just barely kind of getting the doors open every day and not having the kind of robust supports and programs that really make a school vibrant and successful.
And the messaging is about how the schools are going to help the low-income families and Black and brown kids. Is it just talk? Is it not really happening?
There's a fundamental tension and disconnect where I hear so many of these progressive values stated all the time about how people are, pro-Black, pro-immigrant, they're embracing, they want everyone to succeed, but our actions as leaders need to line up to that. And when we are leaving...
Joe Biden made huge promises to historical Black colleges and universities. He told them that they can expect up to $45 billion in funding. But that never happened. The heads of Black colleges came to realize that not only were they fooled or duped, but funding that they got under other administrations that was given now had to be applied to via grant writing, meaning that if you did not have a grant writer, then you were not going to get funds that were guaranteed and directly giving to universities. That is a huge problem. That is an assault, and that is an injustice. The Democratic Senate, which is a part of Congress who has the majority, did not follow Joe Biden's recommendation of giving historical black colleges $45 billion. In fact, the Democrat-led Senate went against the Democratic leader's recommendation and reduced the budget until $2 billion, meaning that Democrats themselves were against historical funding for black colleges, not Republicans, Democrats. Even though the bill was blocked by Congress, Joe Biden still had the power to enforce an executive order or to use his position to influence or encourage the Senate to side with him. But he did not. He did not put up any fight, and he allowed the historical black colleges to be defunded. Not only that, but the funding that they got directly now was converted into grants that had to be applied to. You can see here clear as day, when the U.S. Senate had a 50-50 tie, Kamala Harris broke the tie, making the Senate the majority Democrat, the same Democrat majority that rejected funding historical black colleges $45 billion and reduced it to $2 billion. Build Back Better is labeled as a success, but all that it did was put blacks and browns at a disadvantage. Black publication News One even acknowledged that the Democrats seem to be leaning right when it comes to helping and funding black colleges, but the mass of black people still don't understand the complexities of the assaults that just happened against brown and black people. The biggest issue with the funding is that there was funding that was supposed to be specifically for black colleges and universities, but instead, black schools now have to share funding that would have went exclusively to them with other minorities, minority-serving institutions that are not black. So, black people had funds that were specifically for us, but now we have to share our pot, our HBCU pot, with other minorities. We're not saying they don't deserve it, but we're saying that you promised us funding, then now you're giving it to other people. Why is this new bill and why are Democrats extremely racist against black people? Because they took direct funding, meaning funding that was given to black colleges without asking for it, without requesting it. Now, the same funds that were permanently granted to black colleges, now you have to write a grant to get, meaning that if you do not have an endowment department or a grant writing team, you are going to miss out on funds that you would have otherwise gotten. That is defunding black education. Again, it's not that black people are against other minority serving institutions against getting funding. We're against marketing that you're giving black people something exclusively, but then on paper, making black people share the pot of endowment with other races. Why don't you give them their own funds? Why do every minority has to share funds that's for black people? That is not fair, and that is a form of discrimination within itself.
My parents were addicts until they weren't. Went to about 11 elementary schools, grew up homeless, lived in 2 shelters in San Francisco, 2 in Oakland. And education really was the refuge. It was like, that was the thing that was going to get me, out of poverty. And it's something that when you go to that many schools, you start to notice differences and you notice things. And, I didn't go to the best schools. So when I became an adult and I got to see more and more schools, it became an easy career for me to pursue, just by having a lot of different experiences. But I know that, I come from people that have a high level of agency where you got to make things happen. And even when the system isn't doing what it needs to do, you got to push on that system while at the same time having plans A, B, and C. And so that's a little bit about me.
What is the issues that the system has, the education system has, that you see based
on
your experience and what you've studied?
Yeah, I think I have a ton. I think that when you can predict with a certain level of accuracy how well in life somebody is going to do education-wise by how much money they make, I think that is a sign of a rigged system. I think that if you don't know how to navigate this education system and take everything that you need from it, you're not